Welcome everyone to Sweetcast. Really appreciate you being here. Uh, I have got a special guest today, and that is Douglas Ernst. Douglas, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. I've liked your channel for quite a while now.
Thank you. Yeah, likewise. When I started getting into ComicsGate, you were one of the first channels that I went to, and so it was actually really helpful to get just the lay of the land at the beginning. So yeah, that was really nice. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about writing. So especially if we've got writers in the group, or in the chat. Let's see, Muttman. Hey, he says, "Yo, what's up, Clint?" Spike is here. Hello, Andrew Disguise. Oh, a new disguise. I'm sorry. Welcome. Good to see you guys. So I'm curious to learn a little bit more about you, and especially if we're looking at the writer's angle. Tell me a little bit about like your history with writing.
Sure. Well, I guess it depends on how far you want to go back, because it could go real far back in turn. I could even go to like the middle school, if you want to go back that far. But because when I was in middle school, there was me and a couple other people who were actually selected for a program where they would bus you to the high school for a couple hours each week, and then you would engage in writers workshops. And
Oh,
so
wow.
the English teachers at whatever time, I don't know, they were given some sort of directive or whatever, like find a couple kids that you think might be decent writers, and we'll send them to the high school and they could do this creative writing workshop. So that was sort of like my introduction to creative writing. And I mean, I always kind of like stories and all that stuff before then, but like that was the start of it. And then when I went to high school, I continued to be in that program, and then also it continued on with like kind of mentoring again the middle school kids. So then when I was older, I think at that time we were then going out to the middle schools or whatever, and hosting a workshop with them. So it goes that far back. But then if you want to talk about professionally or in college writing workshops, whatever you want to talk about,
Yeah.
I'm there, man.
Well, so I just want to stop. One thing there is writing workshops are invaluable, and like, and we can talk about this a little bit more too. But when you're writing, you have to get feedback from people, and so like the best things that I have learned for writing haven't really been like in English class. Really, they've been in writers workshops or in a writers group. So yeah, that's awesome that you had such an early start there. I'm curious about your first. You have published work, right? Actually, I've done a little bit more research here. Correct?
Yeah, so now it's weird because my professional life isn't creative writing.
Right.
It's actually with the newspaper, and then speaking of writing, there's a nonprofit organization, a media watchdog called Newsbusters that I wrote for a long time. Not for a
Mhm.
long time, but I want to say like a couple years. So it's mostly been through the newspaper, and then that, but then also for a couple years, Conservative Book Club is another website, and I did movie reviews for them for a couple years as well. And I just stopped recently because the editor-in-chief, he stepped down, and I had a really good relationship with him, and I didn't want to take a chance on a new guy. Uh, so I was like,
Yeah.
I don't want people messing with me, switching up the routines, and
Oh yeah.
so they paid me for the reviews, and they paid me like a decent amount or whatever, but it wasn't enough to deal with headaches with new editors. And then I had this, my project that I'm working on for 2019. I was like, I can't deal with headaches, so I was like, you know what? His name is Chris Malagisi, and when he stepped down, I was like, you know what? When you step down, then I'm going to call it a day too. And then so I left as well. So
Hmm.
a lot of writing for like cultural stuff, movies, pop culture, and then obviously with the newspaper, that's straight news, pretty
Yeah.
dry.
Yeah. It's good experience though. I think, right, doing
Hmm.
all sorts of different kinds of writing. I went to school. I got a degree in journalism. And it's helpful to really boil information down, because even with creative writing, you like, for example, like anything you write on the page should have a purpose,
All right.
especially when it comes to dialogue. So I do think that's a helpful exercise for sure. So what about your creative writing endeavors?
So those are just almost sort of gearing up. So I have a project that's I'll be announcing within the next, I guess, couple weeks. I paid the cover artist this weekend, so he's good to go. Gonna get a couple pieces from him. Again, I don't want to say too
Nope.
much,
Yeah.
but he's a talented individual. We'll put it that way. And the script is all done with that project, and so it's just a matter of the artist getting that done, and then the colorist getting it done and announcing it. So there's that, and then also this is another thing. I know that you have your novels and stuff like that that you've been working on and released.
Yeah.
I have a novel that's completed, but I need an artist to do. Finding an artist to do the illustrations that I want has been kind of very difficult. I had one artist who did some stuff, and I'll probably still incorporate it into the final work. One of the characters, he's not a professional artist. He just kind of sketches things along their journey. It's like a trek across the United States.
Okay.
So for that particular character, I need to have the sketches that he does along the journey in this sort of zombie apocalypse or whatever. So,
Oh,
but so just finding an artist who can do exactly what I want or somewhat close to what I want has been difficult. So I was like, I shelved that for now. And then I was like,
yeah.
all right, I'm going to do the comic book. I'll come back to the novel. The novel's not going anywhere. So
It's yeah, having an artist that is intentionally trying to draw, I'm assuming, like an amateur to give it the right feel, or make it look very handwritten, I guess. Kind of reminds me of an actor playing a bad actor in a movie.
yeah, well, the character's not necessarily a bad artist,
Okay.
but he's not the greatest in the world. And during the
Yeah.
zombie apocalypse, you're not going to be doing Picasso and stuff like that or whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just finding the right artist for the job that was difficult. Luckily, I found one for this project that's coming out in a few weeks or will launch in a few weeks. Got a really great relationship with him, so that's moving along quite nicely.
Cool. I'm just going to take one more look at the chat here. Draken, welcome. He says people just say they like what I write for the most part. That's not really helpful feedback. That's a great point. Getting critical feedback is crucial. Christopher Ryan, welcome. Aaron Olson, welcome. Captain Cummings, welcome.
Oh, nice, Captain Cummings.
Yeah. So sort of getting into working on a creative team. I think I'm going out of order from what I told you, but this is a good segue. Working in a creative team. This is your first sort of comic project, I guess. How has it been like finding an artist, and like what, I guess, sort of advice could you give so far at this point on finding an artist?
So one of the good things about being within this ComicsGate network, if you want to call it that, or Save Comics network, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, is that if you're constantly sort of putting yourself out there and you're meeting with people, just that's how you and I kind of we're basically in each other's orbit. It's like we're these like planets or whatever the heck you want to call it, and there's like a gravitational pull, and eventually we just sort of like meet and be like, hey, I like what you do. I like what you do. And then, you talk and exchange ideas. And it's like, if you're an artist and it might be like, hey, I have this idea for this. And be like, well, I'm free. Do you think I'd be good for you? And so that sort of thing. And so it's just sort of like naturally happens as you're networking. I guess there's like natural organic networking to me. And then there's like skeezy sort of, I'm just trying to use people networking, and you definitely don't want to be in the latter category. But just throughout the past couple years, it started, I guess, with WordPress when I was blogging, and I met a certain amount of people, but it was much smaller. And then when I went to YouTube, you get regular subscribers. I'm also on Twitter. So like if you're across all these different social media platforms, every single one that you do, and you do remotely well, I guess, you're going to have more contacts, and some of them will privately message you and say like, hey, listen, here's my artwork. If you like it, consider me for the future. I like your YouTube channel or whatever, and I like the cut of your jib. And it's so it kind of just happens organically. As long as you just kind of, you're a chill dude or a woman or whatever, and people just get a good vibe from you that you're just honest and straightforward and you mean what you say and say what you mean, that sort of thing, you're going to meet people and they're going to want to work with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I would add so like I've hired a few artists on different projects and they don't always come to fruition. Um and DeviantArt has been a really good place to find an artist, but it works the same way. You have to get to know people and network. It's just a place where more artists hang out.
Right.
Uh have you found it more difficult for you because of ComicsGate, or has that not really made a difference, or has it made it better?
In terms of finding an artist,
Yeah,
no, I think it actually has made it easier in many ways. Now, one of the things, I guess, you mentioned DeviantArt. So I think meeting somebody in person, or at least being able to talk to them, it's like we were talking before the stream went live, when you
yeah,
could actually either see someone face to face or just have an honest conversation as opposed to just texting them. The
yeah,
relationship takes on a different quality to it when you're actually face to face with somebody, um, or at least talking with them regularly behind the scenes on streams and stuff like that. So, in addition to getting to know my artist, I actually made sure that I met them in person, and so that's one way where it's like it becomes real then if there's a person actually, and that's harder when you're dealing with international stuff. I know, but uh, it,
yeah,
it gets difficult. But I would say if you can meet the person uh, face to face, some way, shape, or form, that definitely helps because I don't know. It's
yeah.
just you're able to read people so much better when you're sitting across the table from them and talking to them.
Yeah, I agree. There's yeah, you can also get ripped off paying artists, especially out of the country when you haven't luckily that's never happened to me, but yeah, definitely. It's good to meet them, but then to be able to talk to them. Google Hangouts even is great.
Right.
Yeah. So for sure. So right now your project, I don't want to get into too many details, but just the working process. You've got, I guess you're working on the cover right now. Have you already started working on at least the collaboration portion of the story with your artist?
The story's all done. The script is done. It's been approved. And so now really the only issue is, so one of the things, I came from a creative writing background, and when I was in college, I was out in California. I was at the University of Southern California. So I was into like movie script, and I have movie scripts that I wrote that are just collecting dust and that sort of thing. I suppose if I ever am a millionaire, maybe I'll just make my own indie movie or something like that. But my comic script that I wrote, the artist was like, this actually is kind of like the novel of the graphic novel, and we have to like make it more comicsy, if that makes
Wow.
sense.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it was like more like a movie script. And so, but the team, and then there was also some people that I knew would give me critical feedback that I trusted quite a bit, and I gave it to them, and they were just like, yeah, the story itself, we're totally on board with that. And then the dialogue and all that kind of stuff, the character arcs, the classic hero's journey, all that stuff, like, all right, cool. But then the artist was like, I just need a little bit more in terms of the panel breakdown. So some artists, I guess, again, I haven't
Yeah.
worked with a ton of artists, but some artists want free reign to just do whatever the heck that they want. They want just a skeleton, like the Marvel method or whatever.
Yep.
And then
Yeah.
some artists are like, no, I want more direction. You put on your set designer hat, put on your director's hat, and break it down by the panels for me. And I'm like, okay, I could do that. I'll do it if you want me to do it, but
Right.
I don't want to be the diva writer guy, especially on my first project. That's like, I want this, and I want this number of panels per page, and they got to look like this, and I want make
Yeah.
sure his, whatever, all these little details that like other artists might be like, no, dude, I'm not doing that. So that's been
Yeah.
interesting, and I sort of lucked into having an artist that was very much liked, for me to tell him exactly what I wanted. And then I was just like, okay, well, you're a smart dude, and I like all of your ideas. So wherever you want to chime in, or if you think that maybe something else would be better, if you have a better idea than me, I want to hear it, because I want this to be the best possible project, especially
Right.
since it's my initial outing. And so we'll see how it goes. But I'm pretty happy with the feedback, and the team's been awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a tough route to go. So I guess this is public information. I picked an artist for my project. This is not the first comic project that I've worked with an artist on. I before had just done the short, like 8-page pitches that I would submit to Image Comics. But I got it together with an artist and then started working with him and realized that this is not going to work. And it his art was nice, but he wasn't very professional. And I haven't announced his name ever, so no one knows who he is anyway. But that was such a crucial thing to me, that I had to let him go. And yes, I did offer to pay him up front. In fact, I lost money over it, but to me it was better to lose the money I paid him than to go on for a long project and then be late on a book, or
Right.
not meet people's expectations. So to me it was, I don't feel bad about it. I mean, I wish I had the money, but now I'm working with an artist who is so professional. I'm so happy now. I'm really excited to we've been bouncing the cover back and forth. It's not ready yet, but I'm hoping by the end of the week I should be able to show it off. So
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like you said, it sucks that you lost the money, but on some level, I don't want to say that maybe blessing in disguise, but it's like one of those learning. You
yeah.
could use it, the experience, to learn from it, and so it's whatever you could sort of glean from that bad experience, the lemons and the lemonade sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so I don't, and I hope that he can figure things out, and in the future, he'll do great on his next project. But for me and this one, it wasn't going to work. So that brings up, and I think I've saw a few questions in the chat about collaboration versus, honestly, the terminology doesn't mean as much to me, but I think what people are asking is paying the artist versus saying, hey, we're going to go in this together and treat it as sort of an entrepreneurial effort.
Right.
Do you have thoughts on that? Or I mean, you don't need to go into specific details.
I recently, actually, I think you may have even been in this. Yeah, you were in the stream, right? With Timothy Lim the other night. We were talking
Yes.
about that sort of stuff.
Yep.
And so my particular view is I just want to split things evenly amongst the entire team. And I think that kind of cuts down on a lot of potential arguments, because the writer thinks that they contribute, a certain amount to the story, and the artist thinks that like they're the star of the show, and everybody in their own mind is the star of the show or whatever. And it's like, it doesn't pop unless I'm here as the colorist, or doesn't pop on the page unless I'm the writer, and you got the dialogue, and so everybody has their part to play. Brett R. Smith has talked about how these teams are like a band, and unless everybody's in concert, no pun intended, like they're doing their thing properly, it's going to sound bizarre. And so one of the ways that I found with my project is I really like the idea is just like, yeah, let's just split this down the middle. We're one unit, and we're all marching towards having like an awesome project. But that's coming from an outsider. So that's the thing with ComicsGate, sort of its parallel industry sort of thing, is you have these outsiders that they just want to get a good book out, and they don't care about anything else. And then you have the pros, who they come from a world where the artists are getting whatever X amount of money per book, and the writers many times are sort of, I don't want to say afterthoughts, but I've always felt, and again, this is my bias showing, but the artists tend to poo-poo the writers. And it's like, do you really want to do that? Because I think I was telling you off the grid, what happens is these artists, they think that because they could speak English, that they could be writers or something like that. And it's like what they end up having is this sort of disjointed dreamscape sort of thing. And someone like you or myself, we come in and we sort of thread some sort of coherence throughout the entire thing, tying it all together in ways that I don't always think is appreciated by artists. Although I suppose artists will say that us writers don't always appreciate them. So it goes both ways.
Yeah. There's got to be there's got to be some mutual respect. And especially, I mean, I know I've got a lot of writers that watch this channel. If you've spent time writing or trying to get published, or even just working in a writers group, writing's hard. It's not something. I mean, for me, it's not something that just you whatever the first thing you write is just gold. It takes a lot of work to develop your craft, and it is a craft. The problem is that it's not so visible like art is, visual
Right.
art. So a visual art, you can just look at it and get a really good idea of, oh, that artist knows what they're doing in a second. With writing, it's not so easy. All the scripts, I always say, a bad script and a good script look exactly the same at first glance. You can't really tell the difference until you read it.
Yeah, it's kind of like you have this block, you're the sculptor, and the initial draft or whatever, you need to keep chipping away at it to get to
Yeah.
the beautiful thing that's on the inside. And a lot of people don't really get that. It's actually the writing part, the first draft part is always easy. It's the revision and the revision and the revision
Yeah.
and getting that sort of negative feedback. And like you were saying, we've been to writers' workshops, and you're basically instructed, if you're in a good one, other writers will tear you to shreds. I had it when I
Yeah.
was in college. I had a guy, you had to say what you disliked, and then you had to say what you liked. And then he was like, for the things that he liked about my short story, he was like, I really like your punctuation. And
Oh.
I was like, I was like, why do you have to go there with the insult, dude? And he's just like, it's not an insult. I thought you were very good with your punctuation. I was like, yeah, I know how to place a period at the end of the the
Oh
sentence,
gosh.
or like whatever. I was like, you might as well just, I would have been happier if you just said, I hated everything about this,
Right.
and then said why. But yeah, writers workshops can be brutal. People, and I don't know, I'm assuming there's not like artist workshops where they sit around and critique each other and say like, oh, your proportions are really off, dude. What were you thinking on that one?
Yeah. I don't know. I've never, yeah, I started to learn how to draw. I kept thinking, man, I love writing. My life would be so much easier if I could just draw the thing too.
Right.
Uh, I can't. So yeah, understanding your limitations is good. But yeah, taking, I guess the way I like the analogy that you used of you're carving something, that's exactly how I feel. You get the draft out, and as you explore, and really the rewriting is where it happens. It feels to me like there's already a story in there, and you're just discovering it.
Yeah,
Um,
I could probably tell you this real story about my project. So there was like a miscommunication. I don't want to say miscommunication. I don't know what it was. But so I had turned into the draft to my artist, and he was like, do you mind if I tweak a couple things here and there that we talked about? And they were like pretty much minor for the most part. And I was like, yeah, of course, that's nothing, whatever. And so he went through and he changed this one character from a former Army sniper to a Marine sniper. And in my mind,
mm,
as the writer, when I got it back, I was like, why would he do that? It changes everything because
right.
I know about the unit he was in. I know exactly like what Army snipers go through because I've researched and I got all these books behind me and they
Yeah.
deal with Army snipers. I don't know anything about Marine snipers. Why would he do that? Why would he change it to Marine snipers? So I was like freaking out because like one little change completely changed everything about the character's history in my mind, his future, like
Mhm.
his abilities, what I would have to do to research to do future stories on this character that I was like, so then I was like, dude, why did you change it? And he was like, oh, I'm sorry. I just made a mistake. I must have just, I don't know. I wasn't thinking. I just thought,
Yeah.
whatever. And I was like, no, I'm a writer. Like every single word is there for a reason. And if you change it, like if you just take out an entire paragraph and you're just like, oh, it's just a paragraph, in like a novel or something. It's like,
Yeah.
no, writers on a novel, I could spend 5 hours on a single paragraph. If you just chop it, like it's like, ugh,
Yeah.
we we don't take that sort of thing lightly.
No. Yeah. That actually reminds me. I was talking with my artist today. I did want to tell people a little bit of my agreement too with my artist, because I'll get back to that. But he was drawing the picture, and I've been pretty open about my story. Is it takes place in a city in the sky, so it's like 32,000 feet above the ground, and started doing the background. It looked really cool. And then I look in the back and I'm like, what is that? It's not the sun, it's the earth. So he had it so that the earth was up in the sky. It looked really cool, but I'm like, for the story reasons, the earth needs to be below, not over there. So like, yeah, those kinds of communication, and it's not a big deal. But yeah, you gotta be on the same page for sure. I did want to say too, because we were talking about working with your artist. I'm not gonna. This is just one way that I approached it. I'm not saying it's the right way. I've done it different every time. But with this particular artist, we signed an agreement so that we share intellectual property and royalties 50-50, except he has the priority. So that means everything that we make, we've got an agreed upon page rate. He's going to get paid first, his page rate, and I'm going to pay him for the cover, all the pages, for the campaign, so we have something to show. And then once he's paid for the page rate, then I get paid up until I meet the page rate, and then everything's 50-50 after that. So I don't know if that may maybe seem more complicated, but I thought it minimized the risk for the artist. In my situation, I just really wanted to make the artist feel comfortable and feel like he also had skin in the game. So
yeah, and that's where those personal relationships, the more that you could kind of get to know the person, you could kind of figure out what works best for your particular team, how someone wants to be paid, how you want to. And that was something that sort of, when I turned in my script, and then the artist was, so I knew exactly in my mind how the characters looked. And so in my mind, I wrote the whole story, and then I know exactly how they look, and I could tell the artist exactly what I want. But then if he creates the first image of that character, it's like, at what point in time is it still my character created by me? Or how do you like figure that? And that was stuff that I never, and so like, I was like, I'm sorry if this is awkward, but I don't want to mention the character's name or whatever. I was like, he's mine. Like, I'm the creator. I don't care if like on the project as a whole, like as we're world building and stuff like that. So like the actual title of the comic somehow, some way, for the rest of my life, I don't even care if he gets like 50% of like royalties, but I want control of that character.
Yeah.
But like if I want to go to another artist down the line, which I don't foresee that happening, I would like to work with this artist for multiple stories, but for whatever reason down the line, or there's another writer out there who I trust, who I would like to see what he would do with the character, I want to be able to give him, be like, hey, this writer is awesome, and I want to see what he does with this character. I don't want to have any arguments. And it's like, I'll give you whatever money you want. I don't care. So everybody has to sort of like figure out for themselves how they want to navigate that minefield as well.
Right. Yeah, and I will say that we actually wrote up a contract. I don't know if you did that. We wrote up a contract. I mean, it's not like it was, it was mainly just so we're on the same page and we both agree. But I wrote in that I would have the right in the future, should he be unwilling or unable to do sequels or more books or spin-offs or whatever, I'd have the right to pursue another artist and continue the story. So yeah, to me, that's important. Who knows what'll happen down the road, but you want to be able to continue your story. So
yeah, and that's where compromise. I mean, a lot of people don't really. There's so many moving parts and all these different interpersonal relations, and at any point in time, if you get hung up on one of them, you could derail the entire project. So it really takes a certain level of finesse and professionalism to deal with these issues as they come up, because all of a sudden it starts to become real to you. It's like, no, I have this character and it's going to happen. And then you start seeing character designs, and then you start hiring cover artists, and they don't come cheap, and you see it empty your bank account or whatever. And you're just like, okay, now I really have to start thinking about whether it's copyrights or trademarks and all this sort of stuff that you never had to think about before because it was just in your head.
Right. Yeah. Getting other people involved is, it is a lot like a band. and we talked about that a little bit, but, yeah, I was in a band for many years. Some of my viewers know. Yeah, you gotta give and take, and like serve the project, I
Right.
guess, to make it work. So kind of going back a little bit, but talking about receiving feedback, this is always a big talking point. It's something that's been talked a lot about because some professionals in the comic book industry cannot take criticism, even from paying customers, paying readers. What advice do you have for taking feedback on your story?
So, and this goes being a writer. So I've always been, you have to be your own harshest critic. And so in my mind, whatever anyone dishes out against me, it's hopefully, if I've done my job correctly, they're not as nearly as hard on me as I am on myself. And so I know what the flaws in my writing are. I know where you only have so much time in a day. If you're trying to get a project out, there's elements of my story I'm like, man, I really wish I should have contacted that cop that I know, and I wanted to ask him these questions about being a cop, and I didn't do it. And I did all this research into this other area, and I did the military stuff, and people know that my story deals with exorcisms and supernatural stuff, and it's like, you got to make a decision. So I know where my shortcomings are in this particular story, and so hopefully when I see them, I'll be like, yeah, you got me. But if they don't, the other thing is, you're so close to the story that it's like that the old story or parable or whatever, the blind men and the elephant, the 5 blind men, and each of them, one says like an elephant is a thin little rope, and one says no, it's like a tree trunk, and one's like no, it's like a giant wall, and they're not seeing the entire elephant. And so you have to realize, like, sometimes you could get so close to your story that you don't even realize. When I turned in my first draft to I gave it to basically 4 guys that I really trusted a lot, and they were like all super sharp guys, and I was like, they're going to give it to me straight. And so when I heard back from 2 of them, they had been talking it over, and they're like, well, what do you think about this, Doug? What do you think about this sort of like, and it was like an extension of my idea, but something that I just did not, maybe if I had like an extra like 3 months, I would have thought about it, but they just did it like that because they had fresh eyes on it.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, dude, that's awesome. I love that idea. And so you have to be, one, like open to the fact that even on your own project, you're almost not even seeing the whole big picture. And then 2, you just have to be, like I said, your own harshest critic, and just be humble. I think being humble is very, very important, because you're not going to get outraged if someone says something. If you have confidence in yourself as a writer, if you did your work, if you did your research, and someone doesn't, some people are just not going to like it because it's not their style, and whatever. You're not, if you're a professional, you're not going to get into like a blind rage because someone said, yeah, well, your dialogue here was too cheesy or this or that, and whatever. So
yeah, you got to be able to take it. Yeah, it's the only way that you're going to get better or know what the problems are. I started by writing short stories, and I just did it on my blog, and I just wrote them myself, never had anybody read them, and I thought they were pretty good. I'd find things that were wrong or it could be better, but once I started talking to, I had kind of this writing mentor and worked with a writing group. I found out they were awful, but you just don't know, and it's so good to have somebody you can trust. It's almost like you're trying to paint a picture with your eyes closed. Yeah, because you're so close to it, you think you know where it's headed, where it's going. You have to have somebody else tell you how it goes over, especially because just the form of writing, you're almost, I guess the way I think of it is your canvas is somebody else's emotions.
right.
And so if you're trying to write a likable character, and they're petting the cat, they're good looking, and they've done all these things in paper that should make them likable. If your audience doesn't like them, and it's going to vary depending on the person, but they're going to say, like, I had somebody read my script for Downcast, they're like, oh, pretty good, except for I don't like this person until page 6 or page 7. And that's important. So it's like, okay, you got to reformat something, at least make them not hate that character.
Yeah,
Um,
that
yeah.
was on my script, actually. There was a couple moments in time where the character uses sarcasm. And in my mind, the sarcasm was kind of like Chris Pratt's delivery as Star-Lord in Guardians of the Galaxy. He always has a glint in his eye. He's got a smile. You know, he's not a mean guy.
Yeah.
And when he uses it, you don't dislike him. But when my artist was reading it, he was like, I don't like this character. And he's coming across kind of like a SJW in this instance, Doug. And I was like, but that's not how, what? And so I had to be like, okay, well, what did I do to not convey that he's like Star-Lord sarcasm and not sort of Marvel SJW sarcasm in this instance?
Yeah.
If someone is not getting it, instead of being like, you're not getting it, it's really like, try and just put the onus on yourself to be like, okay, well, I didn't articulate. My job as a writer is to be eloquent with how my characters are and articulate these to the world in a way where other people can get it. So
Yeah.
I either need to change the scene, or I got to tweak it, or I got to do something because he didn't get it, and maybe one or two other people may have thought the exact same thing. So I gotta figure out how to get this across the correct way.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes I've noticed you'll get feedback from somebody, especially if somebody's maybe not a writer, or they're a reader that reads a lot. That feedback can still be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes they're not really going to know which lever to pull to correct the problem, if that makes sense. So they can tell you, hey, this scene feels rushed. And then you, as the writer, it's your job to be able to look at the scene and say, okay, how can I fix? There's a pacing problem.
Mm.
I know then there are certain tools I can do to control the pacing. How am I going to use those tools? Especially in comics, you have a whole set of other tools that you can use. So yeah, I think that's a writer's got a lot to do. And I think it's often underappreciated, but a good
And
writer is, yeah.
the thing with comics as well is, so some of the things with my artist initially is I was trying to have a light footprint to give him more creative leeway. And so in my mind, I was like, okay, well, the artist is the one that needs to visually portray this character with that glint in his eye, or that smile, or whatever. And so there's certain things, it's like, okay, if
Yeah.
I was writing a novel, I would be able to have that space, that breathing room, to kind of let the reader know exactly who this is. But when I'm trying to write a comic script, I'm still trying to learn exactly at what point in time I'm giving the too much information or not enough information, and finding that sort of sweet spot where they know, like, oh, okay, I got it, and they could just do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's comics are fun. The thing I like about writing comics is you're not. I hate the logistics. I guess they got tiring to me of writing. I've written a couple novels. The like he said this. He, like just the logistical part of the
Mm-hmm.
writing to make it make sense, and you don't have to do that when you have got pictures, because the picture is showing you exactly what's happening. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff I like about writing for comics. It's like I want to do more of it though, like with an artist, and complete a project. I'm really, really excited about just completing a project, not just 8 pages. Okay, let's see. We talked about, I'm just going to pull up our list here of things. The future of the comics industry. This is sort of shifting gears. I was curious on your thoughts. What do you think? How do you think the industry is going to change, or needs to change?
Well, that's kind of what all of our channels are really all about, is trying to figure it. I think that the industry may deny that what we're saying, we have legitimate criticism, but deep down they know that we're right. And so
Yeah.
people have mentioned Marvel basically farming out their intellectual properties to other companies. They've already started with IDW with some of them, that sort of stuff happening. the role that Amazon plays in it? Will people just eventually? I saw your live stream the other day on Saturday with
Oh yeah.
John Luke. I woke up at Saturday morning and I do my little circuit, and I saw that you were live, so I put that on as soon as I woke up, and you guys were kind of hitting the nail on the head with a lot of it in terms of how things will be put out in the future, and what role Amazon will play, and how are comic shops going to be affected, and all this kind of stuff. I guess the one thing we do know is that, one, people always are hungry for good storytelling, and I think social media has kind of like changed the paradigm, the landscape, in terms of now you could have this direct interaction with the consumer, the long-term readers. You could actually forge a relationship with them in ways that just wasn't really possible in the past, where they really feel like they know you and they trust you and they're really invested in you. If they get the feeling like, hey, this guy's in it for the long haul, I want to be here with him, that's completely different. In the past, maybe you would meet someone at a convention or something like once a year or whatever, but now you could literally interact with your favorite writers or artists or colorists on a daily basis. And so that it could be a double-edged sword, because sometimes you feel like someone's your friend, but maybe they feel as though it's more like a professional thing, and maybe they say something that rubs you the wrong way. But if you do it correctly, I just feel as though you could really sort of cement a long-time readership with people in ways that you could not do in the past.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'm looking over at chat here because I'm sorry guys, I've been neglecting you too much. We got a question. I'm a writer. I've got a few books out on small press publishers. Congratulations. I'm looking for some way to break into comics as well. What do you think is the best way to go about that? That I think dovetails perfectly into what you were just saying, in that you can get out there, start networking, create a social media presence, get to know people, be professional, and start making comics. You can go. I've gone the route of submitting things to like Image Comics. It's not easy. Not that it should be easy, but you can. I don't know. I would suggest make a comic. I think that's the best way to go about it. Just get going. I know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you just have to find people online that you believe that are honest, they have integrity, and like I said, they're going to be in it for the long haul, and they mean what they say and say what they mean. I mean, those people are online, and if you find them, so I'm not saying I'm a perfect guy by any means, but people that DM me on Twitter, I'm pretty good about responding to every single person that sends me a message. If they ask me a question, I might say like, listen, I'm at work right now. I will get to you after work or whatever. Or I will circle back with you as soon as I can and let you know what I think. I just started a YouTube channel. There's a guy I got to get back to. Actually, I should probably do that tonight. He started a YouTube channel and he's like, Doug, let me know what you think. I gave him a quick reaction. I was like, I will give you a more in-depth reaction as soon as I can. And so if you find the right people that they just want good comics too, eventually, like I said, your orbits, the gravitational pull, you'll eventually find each other. But we kind of live in a society, it's like the sort of, they want the drive-through happiness or something like that, or drive-through success, where it's like instantaneous, where it's like you just have to be in the mentality like, no, some of this, it's kind of going to be a slog, like a long, hard slog.
Yeah.
And you just have to mentally be like, yeah, that's how it's going to be. And then if it goes quickly and your channel explodes and you're like the next Diversity in Comics or next Ethan Van Sciver, whatever the heck, in terms of YouTube popularity, that's great. But for most people, you have to put in a lot of hours. I know you've mentioned it on your channel. Yeah. Many hours prepping ideas, responding to people, doing all that kind of stuff. And I think eventually there's almost like a tipping point, and then things kind of like quickly sort of like take off and take shape. But you have to go through that initial sort of the creative darkness or something like that before you get to the light.
Yeah, finding where your niche is. And it's weird because we're talking about writing comics, but I don't know. For me anyway, I feel like as the writer, I have more of a responsibility. I also need to market this thing. I need to create a personal brand. And YouTube has been great for that. There are certainly, I mean, there are a lot of YouTubers in the field, but there's other ways for sure that you can be known in the community. And really, the industry's small. You can talk to a lot of people. I'm the same way as you. If you DM me on Twitter, I will respond. I haven't ignored anybody yet. So yeah, there's definitely people you can talk to and yeah, get to know. Looking at chat here, remember Papa says, remember when you submitted to Black Mask Sweetcast? Yeah, I don't know if you
The
silly
Kwanzaa.
silly video. Yeah, maybe that wasn't so professional of me, but it was fun. How do you go about finding people to do art? For example, how did you find your artist? I'm in Japan, so I'd be making the comics available in both languages. We talked about that a little bit earlier in the stream. You can just start networking. You can meet people on DeviantArt, meet people on Twitter, YouTube, in person, and then wherever you meet them, I would try to build a relationship. I guess in a nutshell, that's what I would say.
Yeah, initially, like you kind of get a feeling like, oh, this is a guy that I would want to hang out with in real life. So like a guy like you and a guy like Professor Geek, like really your just style and delivery just sort of like resonates with me. And so you're
Okay,
like, okay, this guy seems like someone we have a very similar sort of temperament or whatever. And so I want to talk to this guy or whatever. And then somewhere along the line, if you're watching videos, if you're commenting, you just sort of start to, it's just natural, like I said, like an organic. And so with my artist, for instance, we initially weren't even, he is an artist, but we really got to know each other through other means, other topics, talking about politics, talking about faith and spiritual things, off the grid, not publicly.
sure.
But it was just one of those things where it's like, okay, this guy seems like he's on the same wavelength as me. And we really were just talking about other stuff privately. And then it's like, I don't want to like liken it to some relationship or a romantic relationship. My wife jokes that he's like my boyfriend or whatever. But so then you start talking to people on the phone and you have extended conversations and about all sorts of stuff. And then naturally it sort of happens. So I think if you're just, how do I say it? The more that you get into things, just trying to find a real, genuine relationship with someone, as opposed to finding ways to like use them, objectify them or whatever. The ones where if you're just like, how do I use this guy to forward my career? Those are the relationships that sour. There's something at its origin, it's just not right. There's something not cool about it. But if you go into it just trying to find like, no, I really just want to have a genuine dialogue with this person. I want, hopefully I talk to him, he talks to me, he comes out a better person, I come out a better person. Those are the sorts of relationships where eventually you could get the lightning in a bottle sort of thing. And it's like, it's almost like some sort of metaphysical or spiritual reward for not being sort of greedy and just weird, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. And I'd add one more thing to that is that there's so many artists out there and so many like really talented artists as well. But there's I don't know, it's difficult. It's stressful to me because it's kind of like, I don't know if anybody else is like this, but buying a car is one of the most stressful experiences I have because it's like this long commitment. You're spending a lot of money. You want it to be the right car for you, not necessarily like, oh, I'm going to get, oh, I need to buy a car. Well, of course I'm going to buy a Lamborghini then. That's not really the reality. So like I found really great artists that just financially making, because it really is like starting a business. If you're going to publish it yourself, financially, it just wouldn't make any sense. You would, it'd be impossible to make money with some of the rates. If somebody's understanding of that, and they're a great artist, but they're not very professional, like I was explaining before, that's also a deal breaker. It doesn't matter how great of an artist they are if they can't complete a book, or if they're not very good with storytelling. I would also say you've got to look at sequential art. doing pinups and covers is great, but it's not the same thing as sequential art because there's
Right.
storytelling. So yeah, when you get all of that out to work, and it definitely takes time, at least in my case, it's taken a lot of time looking through a lot of portfolios, meeting a lot of people, and in my case, spending and losing some money to find an artist that I think is going to do a great job.
Exactly.
Let's see. Benny J in the chat says, for my artist, I looked extensively for the right style through DeviantArt and I haven't heard of that one. People Per Hour. Found the right guy. He's delivering the goods, but I have no idea if he's into my stuff. That's another good point too. Is if your artist is excited about the project, your project, I would imagine they're going to be putting out better work.
Yeah, that was the I mentioned the novel earlier when I had hired an artist. I never got the feeling that like he kind of was initially, and then I don't know if something was going on in his personal life. Then it was like pulling teeth to get any art, and I was like, I'm paying you exactly what you asked for,
right?
And we set up a timeline, and you can't give me what I want on the time. And so you're getting these like weird things where it's like, I was telling my family, I was like, God, geez, I wanted 12 images at least from this guy. And it's like, all of a sudden a year has gone by. He's giving me like 4. So like, at what time do you pull the plug? I've already spent, X number of, whether it's hundreds or thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And you're just like going crazy. It could be a very frustrating process.
Yeah, it's hard. That's why it makes sense to me why you'll have certain creative teams that just stick together for long runs. If you find something that works, I'll tell you, like, I really hope that everything goes really well at Downcast, because I would love to just stick with the same guy forever. It would just make things a lot easier.
Yeah, that's how I feel. It's going back to Brett R. Smith's band analogy. It's like you put the band together and you got the Rolling Stones or whatever you want to call it, and you're just like, okay, can we stay together? I don't want to like start trying to mess with all these other people and all the different chemistries that it takes to make this go. Let's please just stay together and take this train as far as it'll go.
Muttman in the chat. Hey, Mutt, it's good to see you. I've had him on the channel before. I know he is an artist. He says, sweet cast, many comic artists have to work regular jobs and side gigs to make a living. How long is too long for an artist to finish a page? That's a great question. And the answer is it depends. I'll tell you from my perspective as someone that is like paying an artist, I don't work for Marvel, obviously. I'm not under a strict deadline. But what I do want to see is that there's progress being made.
Right.
And that was, I'll tell you, the first problem I had with the artist I had to let go was that it'd been a month of, I'll get started tomorrow. The next day, I'll get started tomorrow. And so it was just, and then once he finally did something, it was really rushed and not representative of what his other work was. So yeah, to me, like if you're working on something and if you can commit to doing a page a week even, and you're working on it and communicating, especially if your writer's paying you for it, that to me is the big thing. I'm much more, I don't need like a page a day. I don't have that kind of deadline. So
yeah, when I was talking with Tim the other day, he was talking about basically some of these contractual stuff being like the prenuptial agreement, going back to like relationships. And you mentioned communication. To me, as the writer, as long as you have open lines of communication and you properly manage expectations, like then it's not a problem. You're like, even if you were like, I could do 1 page a week. Okay.
Yeah.
As long as you stick to what you said you were going to do, and then I see the results, I don't care. But if you tell me a page a week and then it's like a page every 3 weeks, then it's like we have a problem.
Yeah. And if something comes up, this is another thing. If I had an artist that told me, hey, I had a family situation come up, I know like I was going to have a page done by Friday. I'm going to try and have it done by next Wednesday. Honestly, like I'm not upset at that point. I'm not, again, not under deadline right now. But it's not finding out about delays until after the fact. So I really honestly think, especially if you're working on an indie book, this is an easy problem to remedy just by communication.
Right. And for the most part, writers, as long as there's incremental progress towards the ultimate goal, they're going to be happy because they're going to see the artwork. And if it's a good artwork, they're going to get psyched every single time you finish a page and you're like, yes, it's coming together or whatever. And they'll be fine. But like you said, if you're not communicating, if you're just going radio silence for long periods of time, if the writer feels as though you are not invested in their story, but you said you initially were, those are the things where it's like, you could start getting into like weird, your own worst case scenarios in your head. And maybe that's not, maybe the artist has legit family problems going on, but without that open line of communication, things will break down. They could break down very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's another good point is, well, okay, slightly changing subjects here, I guess, but I got thinking on a lot of this is what the writer expects of the artist, and and if you're a writer, you've been there, you understand the struggle, but there, as a writer, there's definitely things that you can do to make yourself as a writer more attractive, I guess. I mean, it really is kind of like a relationship. For example, I know that you have a YouTube channel that's much larger than mine. That is helpful and it's attractive to an artist because you've got platform and an easier way to sell the book. Maybe, I don't know, can you think of some other ideas that would help a writer sort of stand out more
to the artist?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like anything else, like especially if so sometimes at my job at the paper, people will email me story ideas or pitches essentially or whatever, but it is clear that they have never read anything that I've written before. So if I generally do things on like Hollywood stuff, military technology, and those sorts of things, and all of a sudden you're sending me something about, I don't know, I'm just making something up, like birthday cakes or some like weirdo app that it's like, why would I write on that? You've never read anything that I've done. You didn't take 5 minutes to look at my resume, basically. And so sometimes like I could see an instance where writers would be reaching out to artists where it's like, if you did 5 minutes of research, you would see that I'm clearly not the right fit for you or something along those lines. I don't know. Yeah. Doing your homework on the artist, maybe their style, showing that you kind of, about their style. So here's one for you. I reached out to a radio station for my project, a national radio station. And I said, like, basically like, hey, I think this project would be up your alley or in many of your shows. I would also like to advertise or whatever. But during the course of the conversation, when they call me back, I was able to say, like, this is how I got in touch with, this is how I first started listening to your shows, blah, blah, blah. Letting them know that not only did I want to like pitch them on something, but I like kind of intimately knew about the station, what it was about, the host, everything about it. And so by the end of the conversation, the guy was like, dude, this is really cool. I want to help you out. Let's figure this out or whatever. And it's like, if I didn't do homework, if I didn't properly let these people know that like I value what they do as well, it could have went a whole different direction.
Yeah. I will say one time, the only collaboration I was in, I did not pay the artist at all up front. We got together. I did take him out for lunch and pitched him a couple ideas. I really liked his art a lot. And I also said, I see that you like drawing this type of stuff. I would even be happy to like collaborate on a story. Let's write something about that, something that you like, but we'll, start it from the ground up. It doesn't have to be one of my scripts I've already done. And so I think that was, in that situation, it was helpful. Ended up not working out, but that's beside the point. Danny Agent 87 says, ask him what new kind of military tech will AI be used for in coming years. Totally off topic, but I don't know. Do you have an answer for that?
How AI will be used in military technology?
Yeah, in the coming years.
I'm actually not really. I agree with Elon Musk in terms of AI, and I think it's extremely dangerous. People always are like Terminator and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, one of the things that I like about I guess I should say is kind of cool. The Air Force is going to use it with swarming drones, where you have all these little drones that are getting like hundreds and hundreds of drones, and they could talk to one another and figure out how to do things and fly in formations that otherwise that was never you would never be able to think about before. And so
Wow.
I think swarming drone technology is very cool, but at the same time, like any sort of weapon that you create, it could ultimately be used against you.
Right.
So you got to be careful with that. But yeah, AI scares the willies out of me. That's like the nice way to put it. And I think a lot of times people try to play God, and when you try and play God, weird things happen. We'll just put it that way.
Yeah. I've gone down the rabbit hole a little bit watching like when Elon Musk is that afraid of it. I'm like, oh, should I be more concerned?
And he
that
has
I,
the
that
inside information on this
yeah,
sort of stuff. So he knows that governments are working on all sorts of things, and whether it's biotechnology, there's all sorts of bioethics with gene editing. And so when you combine AI with gene editing, and you basically are going to get like your own like Metal Gear sort of soldiers in the future or something strange like that.
Mm.
It freaks me out.
Yeah, it's I guess good if you're gonna be writing something. There's lots of fuel there.
Right.
Write some fiction, and yeah, that'll be okay. I think we're getting close to wrapping up. If anyone has questions, now's the time. Post them in the comments or in the chat. And I have to apologize. I'm not great on keeping up with the chat. If I had a super chat working, then that might not be such a problem. But let's see. So we have Muttman has a question. Do you like to work with artists who have a similar worldview to yours? Do you think that working with like-minded people creates a better creative partnership? I mean, I can only speak for myself. There's certain things that I think are helpful. I mean, I don't expect anybody, for example, like I would say conservative politically. I wouldn't have any problem working with with a liberal as long as they were okay with me being conservative. You know what I mean? Like I
Right.
don't certainly don't have a problem with that. If there's like problems that would come up, I don't know, I guess to the extent that it would cause problems and prevent us from telling a story. My story is not political whatsoever, so I wouldn't really perceive that being a problem, but I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think sometimes it really comes down to like style. I could work with someone if my stories aren't political either. I mean, they're shaded by my worldview, and there's no way that I could escape that. So the ultimate message is informed by my politics and my faith and all that kind of stuff,
Sure.
but it's not, the SJW shoehorn to politics. So I could work with someone who's liberal. My main thing is if you're someone that's into timeliness and being punctual and on a deadline, and you want to set deadlines and meet deadlines, sometimes you could get artists that are the stereotypical, like, hey man, like what's the big deal? Like 1 week, 1 month, we'll get it done. Like that sort of thing. You're like, maybe I'm not the right guy for you, because
Yeah.
so those are things where it's like you want to make sure that you're on the same page. And yeah, you could get into like weird tricky things. I like working with people that are essentially you don't want someone to rubber stamp anything you do, but you share a general sort of worldview. It's just like, like my wife or whatever. You're not going to get married to somebody who's got the polar opposite worldview of you, or else there's going to be clashes and all sorts of stuff. So I'm about avoiding drama, but I want someone who's honest and forthright with me in terms of if I screw up, if I'm off base. Like when I wrote my script, I was pitching stuff to my wife, and certain things she was like, yeah, not feeling that one, Doug. And
Yeah.
you want somebody like that, but you don't want somebody who's just completely 180 degrees opposite of you in terms of your worldview and your vision.
Yeah. I will say, I don't, I don't want to work with an artist that's arrogant, and that would, I'm sure, go the other way around too. For me, that I can't handle that kind of a relationship. I want us like a partnership, and also say it might depend on the project too. For Downcast, this might be controversial. I already know I'm going to be getting people that are not happy about this, but the story is it's not like a sexy brother and sister duo. That's not like, it wouldn't serve the story. And so if I had an artist that was like, hey, let's make this as sexy as possible, and
Right.
don't get me wrong, like there's a lot of ComicsGate books out there. I don't have a problem with them, but for my story, that's it wouldn't serve the story.
Right.
So having an artist that's on board with that and is like, okay, this is a story about brother and sister, power and corruption, these kinds of themes, their artworks for it, and they're on the same kind of page, then that to me is probably the most important thing. And that'll change too. If I have a very different story, I'm going to be looking for something else.
Right. No, that's a good point. And yeah, even with my story, I was telling the artist, I was like, just so you know, the 3 characters are 3 dudes. So if you're looking for the busty beauty or whatever, that sort of thing, it's like, that's not my story either.
Right.
So some people in ComicsGate or whatever be like, oh, Doug, you need a quota of the beautiful women or something like that, or else it's not going to sell. And it's like, no, I'm going to tell the story I'm going to tell, and I'm going to have faith in it. And you want to buy it? You want to buy a good story? I highly recommend my story. But if you don't, if
Right.
you're just looking for beautiful women, then the internet has plenty of those if you're looking for that sort of thing.
Right. I'm glad you said that. I'm honestly, I've been kind of fretting over it because like I've heard so many times in my comment section, if you're writing a female character, she better be just a bombshell. And I understand you don't want someone ugly to look at the whole book, but it's like, well, the story, like from a writer's perspective, this story needs to work, and I don't want to. I mean, I want the art to reflect the story. So, yeah, I think that we'll probably see a lot more. And it's not that there aren't ComicsGate books that are like that, but that's the nice thing about having variety. Then you have choices.
Right.
So, I don't think I saw any. Let's see. A lot of foreign countries are afraid to work with ComicsGate creators. This is Danny Agent, fearing backlash. Actually, that has not been my experience with foreign artists. I've talked to a lot of artists. In fact, my artist is from outside the country, and he views the whole ComicsGate thing as nonsense. He doesn't care one bit. Though you might find artists that do have a problem with it. I personally haven't run into that as far as any foreign artists that I've talked to. I have run into it with a few American artists that have had issues with it. So yeah, but that could have just been the luck of my draw, I guess, or who I was talking to. You'd certainly, I hate that I had to do this, but bringing that up, like, oh, by the way, I'm in the ComicsGate community and people know who I am. Like, it's, I'm not like widely known, but it's not a secret. So, yeah, it was kind of annoying that I'd have to make sure everybody understood that, but I didn't really actually see it as a problem.
Yeah, well, with someone like you, or even like me, whenever people are just like, oh, ComicsGate, like if you randomly are talking with people online or whatever, it's just like, look at my channel, look at the way I conduct myself on a regular basis. Look at I stand behind my body of work in how I interact with the world. And if you have a problem with that, then I'm sorry, then I'm just not for you. But if you want to just blanket statement like all of ComicsGate are the devil, like you're just like, okay, well, I can't help you then. I just know that I try and act like an adult on a regular basis, and if that bothers you, then oh well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. There might be people that have problems, but yeah, Muttman has a great answer. On-time payment can work to soothe a lot of artists' fears on working with ComicsGaters. That's true. I talked to a colorist from the UK, and I told him about ComicsGate, and he's like, he didn't even address it. He just said, "Hey, by the way, this is how much I charge." So as long as he got paid, he was happy. I ended up not going with him for other reasons, but yeah, that is a great point. Let's see. Last one here, Sweetcast. You and Doug are great ambassadors. Thank you. That's kind words and high praise.
Yeah, no, that is a very, that kind of compliment means a lot to me, because it's one of those things where there's so many hit pieces and people that sort of malign ComicsGate on a regular basis. And so if you could be someone who they're like, really, look at Sweetcast, you really think he's a bad guy? If you could be that sort of ambassador, it really sort of takes the wind out of the sails of your critics, where they're just like, even they have to like begrudgingly be like, well, he's the outlier or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, and there's a lot of I mean, my interactions with people in ComicsGate have been really positive. In fact, more positive than when I was just trying to network with people in the comic industry at large. But everybody's going to believe what they want to believe, I guess. So, all right, I think we're gonna close it off. Thank you everybody for watching. It was really great to have you. If you haven't yet, please give us that like, the thumbs up. That's helpful. And if you'd like to support the channel, I have in the description below a link to my ebook. This is a novel I published in 2013. You can go download it for free, read it, roast it, whatever you want to do. And all I ask is that you enter my mailing list, and that's just because I don't really trust YouTube. So when I come out with my book Downcast, I would like to just shoot you an email so you know that it's happening. And if you haven't yet, also go check out Douglas Ernst's channel and subscribe there as well. Anything else you want to pitch?
I really just want to say I appreciate you having me on. Like I said, I've respected your channel for a long time now, and I want to thank everybody who watched tonight. I didn't have the chat up for me because I was afraid my laptop would get hot and make noise, so I apologize for that. But like I said, 3 or 4 weeks, I'll be launching my project. We have a team of very professional dudes together. I think you'll be quite happy with them, and so I'm looking forward to the reaction to that, and I look forward to interacting with all you guys in the future.
Great. All right. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next time.